Now it is that time of the month again where we get our very special guest, Ambassador Yunyo Chol, into the studio to have a bit of a chat with us about what's happening around the world diplomatically. And he joins us in the studio today at a very pertinent time in the month for sure, with a lot going on around the world. How are you doing today, Ambassador?
Very good. The Korea is also busy with its own presidential election, but the world is watching Ukraine.
They are. So that's what we're discussing today, yes?
Yes, it should be about Ukraine. Russia has been playing a guessing game with the rest of the world, making everybody wondering, will he or will he not? But on Tuesday this week, Putin finally ordered his troops to enter eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, it was a very interesting news conference that he gave there. So first of all, let's recap what Russia has been doing and why they've been doing it.
Well, from April last year, Russia has amassed a huge number of troops along the Ukrainian borders on the pretext of its own military exercise. The number reached 190,000, which is about 75% of its all ground forces, as well as tanks and heavy weapons. And on the border with the Belarus in the north and the Black Sea in the south were deployed Russian troops again, and with the ships in the Black Sea, completing the encirclement of Ukraine. So why are they doing this? Since the end of Cold War, Russia has been complaining about the eastward expansion of NATO, which the West promised not to, in a way. But it absorbed most of its former Soviet satellites and deepened the proverbial Russian siege mentality. So NATO membership for Ukraine, one of its former Soviet republics, is something Russia cannot stomach. Particularly, Putin cannot let this happen, as his rule is based upon Russian people's nationalism. So he now needed to show some force and stop this big trend.
Yeah, look, the Russians have watched as all their former allies in the Warsaw Pact have joined NATO, and it was expected that they would be angry about that, but it seems like the ex-Soviet republics are where the Russians are drawing the line.
Right.
And Ukraine, obviously, a very expansive territory between it. It is the buffer, right, between NATO and Russia. So there have been some diplomatic efforts to avoid the war, yeah?
Well, yes, they tried. While the United States and NATO argued that every state has its own sovereign right to choose alliances, leaders of the West have also been trying to make out what Putin really wants and to persuade him to de-escalate. Biden and Putin have had 3 video talks in which Biden reiterated his warnings on the consequences Russia would face. The two sides have exchanged letters on each side's position and demands, which may provide a basis for a diplomatic solution. But the latest reply from Russia was with hardened position of banning foreign military assistance to Ukraine. President Macron of France and Chancellor Scholz of Germany scrambled to visit Russia and Ukraine, while other leaders of Europe phoned Putin. Putin must have gloated that the rest of the world is now finally paying attention, now that he made trouble after they have ignored him for so long.
Right.
President Macron also proposed a summit between the United States and Russia, which Biden accepted with the condition of no invasion. But with the invasion taking place now, the summit, as well as Blinken-Lavrov meeting, which was scheduled for today, Thursday, have been cancelled.
Yeah, it is always an interesting one. I don't know, I'm not as diplomatically savvy as yourself, but I find preconditions often do put a spanner in the works of any sort of talks going ahead. And I'm not a big fan of them, to be honest. I think in some ways they ignore the reality of the situation or the reality of the crisis, right? So these people need to meet preconditions or not. So how determined were NATO members to respond to a possible invasion then?
Well, they were initially talking about the severe sanctions only. So the main leverage for the United States is economic sanctions, financial network, and trade restrictions upon Russia. But the U.S. also needed military preparation as well in case sanctions cannot deter Russia, just like it didn't just now. In February, the United States deployed 3,000 troops in Poland and Romania, which are NATO allies, and they are also Ukraine neighbors, but not in Ukraine itself, which is not yet a member, to which U.S. provided defensive weapons only.
Right, so there was a period where the world was holding its breath around February the 16th because the Americans had specifically named that day as the day they thought a Russian invasion was coming.
Right. Russia argued that the movements of troops were only for military exercises, denying any invasion plan. But by sharing this critical intelligence on the Russian war plan, the United States tried to block the war. So on the 14th, Russians aired Foreign Minister Lavrov's briefing for Putin, where Putin approved Lavrov's recommendation for diplomatic options just by saying "da." Yes. And on the 15th, the Russian Defense Ministry reported some Russian troops going back home after ending their exercise. So February 16th passed without anything, and the world had a momentary sigh of relief. But all this was an orchestrated psychological warfare to confuse the West. Up to the last minute, nobody knew for sure whether Putin would really invade, how far he would go, and what his war aim or end game would be.
Right. Now, a lot of those questions still are being asked, in fact.
Right.
But he has, I suppose, revealed his hand on one of those issues. How then did the situation change?
Well, with the February 16th passing by, the leaders of the West were not convinced by this charade and demanded more proof. In fact, there were reinforcements, not withdrawal of Russian troops. And on the 20th, Russia and Belarus announced the extension of so-called joint exercise. And the two leaders, Putin and Lukashenko, oversaw together the strategic missile test of Russia to show their force as well as solidarity. So Ukraine and its separatist provinces exchanged accusations of provocations, who shelled who. And that may give pretext for Russian intervention, as I had feared last month. And finally came the news on the 21st, which was my birthday, that after a passionate speech by Putin on Russia's historical unity with Ukraine, Russia has recognized the two runaway regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Then Russian troops were deployed in those regions as peacekeeping forces upon the latter's request, which the UN Secretary General criticized. Right. The U.S. condemned the act as breach of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The initial U.S. sanction, the ban on the transactions with those separatist regions, looked too timid after so much warning. But now U.S. is following up with new sanctions, targeting Russian financial institutions and Moscow's sovereign debt, as well as 5 individuals, but not Putin yet. Maybe still looking for a possible diplomatic negotiation. And German Chancellor Scholz was initially reluctant to use the new gas pipeline from Russia, Nord Stream 2, but finally suspended its certification after the invasion. So EU and Japan are also putting together similar sanction packages. In the meantime, the Russian Duma parliament approved sending Russian troops abroad, which is another show,
right.
Propaganda. But Putin said, not now. But it depends upon the situation on the ground. So he continues to play the game with the West on who makes what move.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Yes. Wow.
Well, Alex, you know the expression, I have seen this movie before?
Well, we have, yes. Tell us, what about it then?
Well, in 2008, Georgia, another former Soviet republic, with a new management at the time, with youthful leaders in their 30s, bet on the support from the United States under President Bush and confronted the Russian pressure. But the result was the Russian invasion on the pretext of protection of the Russian minority enclaves inside Georgia, South Ossetia, and Abkhazia. So what's happening now in Ukraine is a copy-paste of 2008 Georgia invasion. Those countries with Russian minorities now in Baltic area, are now getting nervous.
Yeah, look, I can speak to this one as well, because there's my cousins in Moldova who are a little bit worried about what's happening in the Ukraine because of the Russian enclave in Transnistria there as well.
Everywhere, actually.
Yeah. This is basically what happened under the Soviet Union, right?
And then that's what Hitler did in 1930s about German minorities everywhere.
Seen that movie before as well, haven't we? So then what would make Russia relent then?
Well, at first I thought the U.S. surprised Russia by showing more determination to face off the threat than Russia had expected. But when Biden mentioned his fear of a world war, I think that was a mistake. He indicated the limited U.S. involvement, militarily. So again, after the invasion took place, Biden said he has no intention to go to war with Russia, while he reconfirmed his resolve to defend NATO allies. So already on the sanctions after its annexation of Crimea in 2014, Russia may not want to be cut off further from the global economic system. But Russia says it has also been working on insulating its economy from the rest of the world. I don't know how that works, but still, Russia has so much to lose from this aggression, and Putin may not take all the risk, but may play the game of nuances. And now that the Russian troops have officially moved in, the independence of separatist regions will be a fait accompli, and they will serve as buffer zone under the wings of Russia. And Russia will continue to threaten further invasion into Ukraine proper until its demands are met at maximum. So the West may continue condemnation at the United Nations and imposition of new sanctions, but they also need to find a modus vivendi or some deal to placate Putin's fear and discontent, to avoid further conflict and to guarantee a semblance of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty with a new security architecture. We remember President Zelensky calling Ukraine's NATO membership a remote dream.
Yeah, he's probably not far off the mark there. So what are the implications for the state of the alliance regarding NATO themselves?
Well, when President Trump was pushing allies to increase their defense budget while cozying up to Putin, NATO went through the lowest period in terms of unity as well as in sense of purpose. But the latest confrontation over Ukraine came as a wake-up call for the members about how important their alliance was and how united they should be. So we also witnessed the fragmentation of positions and lack of commitment among the members.
Yeah.
France offered the Finlandization concept without consulting Ukraine, and Germany wavered over Nord Stream 2. Their military contribution has been modest at best. Maybe free rider mentality got entrenched after long peace and prosperity after the Cold War. So this will be an opportunity for NATO to revamp its structure and their individual commitments as they deal with this crisis collectively.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago. Emmanuel Macron said that NATO was brain dead, didn't he? So I don't think anybody's saying it's brain dead now. It's very much at the center of this crisis. And if we move back to Korea, then what are the implications here for us on the peninsula and in the general neighborhood?
Well, some people compared Ukraine with Korea. But look, Korea already has a solid alliance with the United States, which Ukraine wanted so much. What is happening to Ukraine now is showing the importance of having a powerful alliance. We don't have a structure like NATO, but Korea and Japan, as allies of the United States, are the only liberal democracies which share the values on this part of the world. We should be ready to do our own share as ally, which will strengthen the spirit of alliance, which will also be important in time of our need. At the same time, China must be watching closely how the U.S. responds to a Russian invasion to glean its own lesson for Taiwan. And, of course, North Korea is waiting for its turn to draw the attention of the United States and the world.
Yes.
So let's keep our close watch as well.
Very true, actually. It would be interesting. It'd be a fly on the wall in China and even North Korea at the moment, because they are no doubt watching the United States response like hawks at the minute to see what their old adversary is going to do on this issue in the Ukraine. Thank you very much for that, Ambassador. Hopefully all's well that ends well on this one.
I hope we will not be discussing Ukraine again in March.
Maybe, yes, that's the best we can hope for. We'll catch you then, no doubt, regardless. I hope you have a fantastic month.
Thank you.